The universe only hears abundance, so it doesn't know lack.
Yeah, Jason Momoa, Renee Zellweger, UFC, Dana White, so many people, and maybe more, that you actually have worked on, they're your friends, and you're really like a celebrity functional medicine specialist. That's not why you started, but yet it's what you received. Why do you think that is?
A big part of it is MitoZen, because there's been this interest with a lot of high-profile people. Somehow the products have found their way into this collection of people.
You helped Dana White crack the code on enhancing oxygen delivery into his brain and body, allowing him to sleep and recover from sleep apnea.
He was waking up in the middle of the night and he was vomiting and throwing up, and he was using a CPAP. It's
horrible.
You're not getting quality sleep.
Yeah.
So he flew to me. I was staying at a friend's in LA, and he literally took his private jet, showed up at the front door, and we did this treatment called functional cranial release, which is this endonasal balloon manipulation. And it literally is an expansive pressure that opens up the nasal passage and the sinuses. But more than that, it restores this movement pattern called cranial rhythm. It's not just bones. There's a connective tissue layer just inside of the bones. And the name of that connective tissue layer is called the dura mater. Guess what that means in Latin? Tough mother. Because it's got 2,000 pounds per square inch of tensile strength. It's very, very durable. It's the mother because it's protecting the central nervous system.
Yeah. There has been so much going on since I came to your clinic. And this is your fourth time on the podcast. I'm just going to light some sage just because it's a ceremonial time for me.
It is.
I just love and respect you, bro. I have so much appreciation for you and how much you've supported me and how much amazing things we do in the world together. It's been epic.
Yes, it has.
So this one's for you, John.
Nice.
We're just going to light some sage here, clear the air. Man,
Nice.
So Austin, you come here quite a bit and you have a big presence in the world. I guess you could say healing people in a way that maybe a lot of people don't know about. You know, healing people's mind, healing people's soul. And we're going to talk about all these amazing new products that you have. So like a kid in a candy store, let's just begin. Tell us what you brought. Let's go over this stuff first.
Yeah. So I've been a big fan of breath work like yourself. You know, you and I have done some epic breath work together.
That's right, on the beach.
Last time we were
Siesta
on the beach. Yeah. And so I've been looking to amplify some of the different aspects of breath work, right? So like, for instance, Joe Dispenza, which I recently did my third advanced follow-up with Joe Dispenza and Marco Island recently, and I would recommend anybody to go check that out. He has a breath, the way he does his breath work is an intentional kind of squeezing of the perineum and a pulling up where you're bringing the pressure from the perineum all the way up to the pineal, right? And so you're kind of locking in, I think in yoga, they say locking in the mudras.
The bandha locks, yeah.
The bandhas, okay,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
So that activates pressures into the cerebral spinal fluid, and those pressures then create a pressurized force to the pineal, right? So it goes up the spinal canal and it goes into these ventricles, right? So these ventricles are like these spaces within the central nervous system. And there's the third ventricle, which is right next to the pineal. So right behind this third ventricle, which is like this big room. And within this room, you have these structures that make cerebral spinal fluid. And they're triggered to make new, fresh cerebral spinal fluid through pressures. And so besides stimulating production of new cerebral spinal fluid, you have this piezoelectric effect that happens through the pineal where the pressures on the pineal create this electrical activity to the pineal through these little crystals. So if you look it up, you can Google piezoelectric pineal and you'll see these like tetrahedron crystal structures that are the cellular structures that make up the pineal. And just like a quartz crystals, the way these quartz watches work is that they put a pressure on it, and that pressure emits electricity because the force on the crystal has this what's called piezoelectric effect. So when you activate the pineal, there's a sensory experience without your sensory organs. And this is those mystical experiences that we feel, or we feel more at one We feel that deep sense of oneness. You know, we might be with our family and we just feel love. We may have experiences that are hard to describe, where we just feel infinite. And this is probably mostly through this pineal sensory experience. And so the more active the pineal is, the more access we have to some of these beautiful mystical experiences. However, there's a lot of problems with the way that, for instance, fluoride causes calcification to the pineal. And the fluoride's in the water. Yeah. So it's like it's in our tap water. That's why you don't want to drink tap water. It's also why you want to be careful with a lot of dental work, because there's a lot of fluoride that they use in dental work, and it's arguably does more harm than benefit, you know, and there's definitely controversy with this. So anybody listening to this, don't take my word and just ditch all their fluoride products. But I know a lot of people that have, and if you value your pineal, you might be thinking a little bit more so to find alternatives to your dental regimes than taking fluoride. So it's so predominant, Josh, that it's literally a landmark on X-rays. And so when they do radiology, they'll say that they'll measure the distance from the calcified pineal to certain areas to identify where tumors and different, you know, aspects of trauma, you know, or strokes might be, because it's like 90-something% of the population has this calcified pineal.
Dude, one of the things that trips me out, I remember a couple years ago we were talking, the pineal is not behind the third eye. It's actually in the center of the brain. It's way down in there.
Yeah.
So this is a piece that is probably one of the most important things that we could ever talk about. Is this related to this blue eyes? This drops?
Yeah. Okay. So the blue eyes is an eye drop that has nano gold, and the gold was very difficult to source. I finally, after searching for a long time, I found a really high quality nano gold. The silver is fairly easy to come by. So it's a combination of silver, gold, EDTA, methylene blue, and there's a little bit of peppermint, and it's in a solution of Quinton minerals, right? So it's deep sea, super healthy minerals. And so it was something that I originally developed based on an eye infection, right? So this new COVID variant that came out was arcuous, and it was having this profound kind of red eye effect. And there was a group in Miami. It's a whole school, this private school. I'm close with the owners, and they messaged me and they're like, hey, we have a real problem here. And so because we've had such great success using the combination of IV silver and IV methylene blue along with light therapy, with COVID, I just knew that if I could make that into an eye drop, that it would be like super epic for some sort of an antimicrobial effect. And so after developing it, I started to have some fun with it with some of my morning sun gazing, and started to realize that some of the photodynamic and the photobiomodulation properties of this could be quite special and even enhancing to the pineal. And the reason being is that, yes, when you apply this medicine to your eyes, it's going to absorb, right? And that's one of the reasons that we put the EDTA in there. So it absorbs into the eyes, and it's going to support mitochondria in the eyes. However, those photons are also going to travel through this solution and pick up the imprint of the gold, silver, and methylene blue, and it's going to travel back into the suprachiasmatic nucleus and to the pineal. So you could almost say it's like homeopathy to the pineal, right? The pineal is all about light. The pineal, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the track that goes from your eyes back to the pineal, it's where this sleep-wake cycle
It's like the master clock for the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then a lot more.
Sure. But it's where the dials exist. It's how circadian rhythm is formed, right?
Right.
I remember I was talking to a neuroscientist about that. I mean, it's on the screen right now, y'all, blue eyes. John, you are like the ultimate. I would say that if there was a biohacker that was the most conscious, it's you. There's a lot of people that are in the marketplace that are just selling stuff. Every single time I see you, we actually, we're putting some special footage in this podcast where John took me through some eye exercises and showed me like He's like, hey, I got this really cool tool. He busted out a suitcase and there was like a screen tracking my eye patterns. You have a really, really fun way of living. And I really respect that about you because you work with some very sick people at times. And then you also work with some really huge celebrities. So this huge chasm of people that are very sick and people that operate at the highest level in the world, you know, in order for you to do that, you have to enjoy it and you have to be talented at the same time, which not everybody can do that. Like, what do you think it is about your joy for what you do? Some of the products are on the screen now. They're also down below. Maybe talk a little bit more about the blue eyes, but there is something I've always wanted to ask you. Like, where does this joy come from? Like, where does this curiosity and joy come from? Not just with your patients in Florida, but like across the world, man. You're about to go to Nazaré, Portugal, and be with Garrett McNamara and these huge surfers. Like, you don't do that. You're not able to do that unless you really enjoy it, unless you have some type of gravitas that other people don't have. What do you think that is about you?
Well, you know, a lot of this, what I call magic carpet ride, really started after I started to do some deep meditation with gratitude for what I wanted to attract into my life. You know, that law of attraction. At the time of The Secret or before?
Well,
so it's funny that you bring up The Secret. So I'm in my clinic, right? And this must have been, I want to say 2015. And this lady travels in to see me from LA, right? And I walk in and she was there for some neurological stuff that I was working on her with. And I didn't recognize her, right? And so I started a conversation. I said, so what do you do for a living? And she says, well, I write books and I make movies. And I'm like, oh, and I'm walking away from the table. And I said, anything I might have heard or be aware of? And she says, yeah, The Secret, right? So it was Rhonda Byrne.
No shit.
It's funny how I was oblivious to that because I'd watched it earlier on and even her name didn't set off buzzers in my mind. I was just on, patient, just focusing on treating the patient. And so we wound up really connecting and becoming close friends. I took her out on my boat. I've been to her house probably like half a dozen times now, maybe more. And so I've had a lot of deep conversations with her about the law of attraction and how she uses it. And it's really transformed over the years since she's done the original movie, The Secret.
Yeah.
So it would be worthwhile if anybody's interested to kind of circle back and, check out some of her newer stuff. But that has been a real asset for me, has been to relax into being grateful for receiving what you want in your life and then really being able to let it go. Like if you clamor to it, like if you're thinking to create this, but then there's this underlying stress of the fear of not getting it, or like I've got to get it, or this has to work. Otherwise, you just have to kind of like let it go and be okay with whatever happens. And the universe only hears abundance, right? So it doesn't know lack. And so you have to think about all the noise besides the abundant part. It's not hearing that, or it's turning it into something that you don't want it to turn into.
Yeah, Jason Momoa, Renee Zellweger, UFC, Dana White, so many people, and maybe more, probably a lot more, that you actually have worked on. They're your friends, and you're really like a celebrity functional medicine specialist. And I'm sure when you started that probably wasn't on your mind. Working with movie stars, working with pro athletes, working with huge entrepreneurs. That's not why you started, but yet it's what you received. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think a big part of it is MitoZen, because there's been this interest with, I think, a lot of the celebrities and a lot of high profile people. Somehow the products have found their way into this collection of people. Like the Zen spray has been a big opener. And then, every day I hear about this celebrity or that celebrity using it. I mean, there was a really famous musician that I was talking to their trainer. I mean, everybody would know who this is. And they had done the Zen right before a big show in Europe. And apparently, it was really epic. Like the show was, he did it for the first time right before going out, which we wouldn't normally recommend.
Sure.
right? I wish I could share you with the name because it's so epic.
John, I've done Zen with a few podcast guests and it was their first time.
Yeah.
Never again. Only when they're seasoned will I give them the Zen.
Yeah.
Because really it's like the most grounding, beautiful. I think it's a great heart opener. It's what Carrie Michelle and I do a lot, probably every single night if we can, if the kids are asleep.
Yeah.
We will actually do Zen, breathe. It fuses our hearts together. It's one of the most powerful things, man.
Yeah.
So not everybody can get Zen unless you're part of a club.
Right.
And there's a special reason for that. I'm part of the club, not because I'm cool. I paid the one-time $10 lifetime fee.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. It's on the screen. It's literally our link, joshtrent.com/MitoZen. It's for all the products.
Right.
Everything, like all the new stuff that you're going to talk about, all the old stuff that I take pretty much every single week, including the Lumitol, which is right here. The new product. This is in the club as well. The Blue Eyes.
Yeah.
And then my all-time favorite, dude, I'm just going to be honest, is the MitoZen, the vertical spray, the Zen spray. That is my go-to. Why did you have to do the club? What's that all about?
Well, so to say that MitoZen's a supplement company would be, I think it would lead a lot of people to think that it's something it's not, right? So it's more of a healthcare technology or a vitality technology company, right? And so a lot of the different products that we have, we don't really have any pills, like traditional supplement style products.
That's true, you don't, yeah.
And so some of the delivery that we use, like some of the bullets that we use that can be used rectally, and some of the sprays and the mists, they could potentially be looked at as a drug because of the delivery, right? Mm-hmm. And so although there's a lot of these products similar that are on the market, it's a bit of a gray area. So because these things work so powerfully, they're really more meant for physicians and doctors and health coaches. If it's an individual that's getting access, and anybody can sign up to be a club member, but if they do, there's a lot of education that needs to come into play. I could not educate anybody through normal route because they call that claims. Like, so if I start talking about, say, like the Blue Eyes and some of the benefits that it can have, then that might be construed as making claims on the product where I'm just talking about specific ingredients. Like, for instance, we can talk about methylene blue and how it's antiviral, how it's antibacterial, how it's a super mitochondrial booster, right? And then we can just assume that if we're going to apply that to the eyes, that we would have benefit to the eye structure. However, you start to get into some gray areas when you start talking about things that way, because whether it's the FDA or even credit card processing companies, they're subscribed to this very set standard that's all backed by the pharmaceutical company. So the pharmaceutical company is in there lobbying all these laws and regulations. So it totally tightens down how a lot of natural medicine, supplements, nutritional, biohacking types of devices, how they can present themselves, because it directly competes with the pharmaceutical.
They're really hitting the CBD companies hard. One of our partners, Curated, they've been shut down like 10 times. Mm-hmm. There's an oligopoly there. So they're spending literally hundreds of millions in Congress, and also like in financial, I guess you could say, educational pathways. They're trying to block natural remedies. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not even a postulation. I mean, it's fact. Anybody that really wants to understand how this is operating, there was a recent documentary it's like a Netflix show. It was called Painkiller. Have you seen that?
No.
So it's based on Oxycontin, right?
Oh, was this the one about the pill mills in Florida?
Yeah.
I did see that. Yeah. The two brothers.
Uh-huh.
Yep, I saw that.
Yeah. So when you look at that, you really understand that it's a corporation, and it's all based on the bottom line and the money. It's not really about helping people. That's of course, there's some conscious pharmaceutical companies out there, but for the most part, they're public. They have stockholders that they have to be accountable to. Yeah. These people are very business minded, very money minded, and so sometimes they get themselves into situations where they've invested hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars into a molecule, and then they find out that there's some problems there. And then what they do is they cover that up, because a lot of their research is paid by them, right? So they may have influence on the scientists that they hire to do the science. and it skews the results, even though some people in the company might actually know that. Like, I don't know how risky this would be to talk about remdesivir, but I mean, you want to talk about some shit.
Yeah.
You know, that killed a lot of people. I mean, look what happened when they introduced that into New York City, all the kidney disease. And then after that, you didn't hear about how COVID was killing everybody with kidney disease, but they had everybody take remdesivir in the beginning, right? So, things can be pretty corrupt. And so it makes it so that the common people hear a narrative that confuses them just enough to keep them on their toes, to keep them into the process, the never-ending sick care.
Yeah, I mean, if you're well, then you're not necessarily a good cog in a wheel. And we know that. We've probably done 50, 60 podcasts on that subject. I think about why people gravitate towards you. I was introduced to you, I believe, by Luke. I kind of forgot how we even met. I think it was from Luke, right?
We had a lunch.
We had a lunch.
It was a dinner. You, me, Khalil.
And we sat, that's right.
Luke.
And I think you were wearing a shirt that said, I trust my immune system, or melatonin is my God, or something.
I trust my pineal.
I trust my pineal. Yeah. So you really you are who you are. And that's something that some people have it and some don't. And so that's why I'm not here to stoke your ego. I've been to your clinic in Sarasota, and I've received some incredible treatment. It's on the screen right now, specifically the laser guided stem cells and the red light therapy. But at the core of a lot of what you do, man, is this conversation about methylene blue. I feel like it's in the majority of podcasts that you talk about. It's all over your clinic. You and I have gone into it a few times before, but something I was interested in, I want to get your take on this. Methylene blue is a positively charged dye that is inherently attracted to acidic cell components and can decrease the production of reactionary oxygen species. Let's go into that and then talk about the other fun things about this, because this is Lumitol blue that I'm holding in my hand. I take this when I'm sick. I take this when I'm sick, and I swear that it makes me heal faster. Now, that's not medical advice. That's just me anecdotally sharing. Talk about that first part, why this methylene blue and Lumitol is so important for us in so many different ways. It's a huge topic.
Yeah, so it's a brilliantly blue salt, and methylene blue has an affinity to the mitochondria, which is where we make energy. And because we can make energy from photons and electrons, methylene blue can work on both those systems because it can harness photons. It absorbs red light, right? So especially if you're out in the sun or you're doing sauna, doing red light therapy, you can really enhance this effect that methylene blue offers. But it donates an electron and it accepts an electron, which is really, really unique. And there's no molecule that has been seen or discovered that has anything remotely the potential to methylene blue to enhance this mitochondrial aspect. So you have 4 protein complexes in the mitochondria, and the mitochondria's job is to move electrons, right? And as I mentioned, you can use photons as well, which we'll get into a second. But it's moving in through these 4 complexes. And so they're named after complex 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as those electrons are moved through that complex, they produce heat, right? So it's considered an exothermic reaction. So that heat is then harnessed and you make something called ATP, and that's the currency of energy. That's the gasoline that's running everything in your body. And if you don't have this even for a moment, you wouldn't exist. So it's really critical. Now, the conversation starts to get to like, how efficient is this pathway? In other words, like if I give you a certain amount of calories, like how much energy can you make from those calories? The other conversation might be, if I give you a certain amount of calories, how much waste product are you going to make based on those calories? So you have the pollution that's going to create, and also how efficient. So, you think about automobiles and cars, you can really start to wrap your head around mitochondria. So you have a really efficient new car versus you have a really old car that's hogging gas and producing a lot of pollution.
Yeah.
So we want those mitochondria to be more like those new cars. And the way that we do that is we enhance its efficiency. And methylene blue does a very good job at that, because it goes in there and it acts as an electron donor and an electron acceptor. and it allows photons, which are in that cytochrome C, which is the fourth complex, cytochrome, cell, cyto, chrome, light. So when we add light to this system, it enhances it even more dramatically. But the science shows that taking methylene blue can enhance mitochondria by about 30%.
That's amazing. When would we do that exactly? Does it matter morning, night? What's the dose? What's the specificity around viruses or illness or sick recovery?
Yeah.
How do we do it?
Well, I know a lot of experts will even say that you're absolutely crazy not to take at least 15 to 20 milligrams of methylene blue every single day.
A day?
Every day. Mainly, it's got anti-cancer properties. It has neuroprotective properties. And if you have a stroke or a heart attack and they had some methylene blue on board, you'd be able to get energy independent of oxygen. So the survivability of those cells would be dramatically higher. I was listening to a podcast with Rick Rubin, and he was talking about a brain surgery that he had, and he wanted to get IV methylene blue while he got this surgery. Yeah, he went to the top surgeon and he asked if he could run a methylene blue IV at the same time that he's getting the surgery, and the surgeon said no. And then 6 months later, the surgeon called him up and said, I did some research. You were totally right. And from now on, I'm going to run methylene blue. And they use this in the hospitals quite a bit as well, too. So it's a required nutrient for all hospital ERs to have. If you have donated blood, what blood banks do is they add a little bit of methylene blue to the blood, and then they expose it to light, like infrared and near infrared light. And what that does is it clears out any pathogens in the blood. So if anybody's gotten a blood transfusion, they've gotten a little bit of methylene blue.
This is amazing. Like, why is it such a confusing topic? A lot of people think of methylene blue only for like malaria. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Where's the confusion there?
Well, I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around something having so many utilities, and things get kind of pigeoned into like one benefit. You know, like ivermectin was like the horse product, right?
Yeah.
Or ketamine is a horse tranquilizer, right? So it's like you have these different medicines or nutrients that, especially people that want to like kind of shine a negative light on it, that's like a tactic.
So this is something that is sourced in a lab. It's not like somebody could just go out and harvest methylene blue. Like, you have to have a trusted source that you get it from. How is it actually created? I've always wondered this, actually. How do you make methylene blue?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's made in a lab, so it's a synthetic salt. And normally I would be, having issues with like something that was synthetic. But when you look at methylene blue and you look at all the things that it does, and in fact, it was called the magic bullet because it has all these far-reaching benefits to the body, but leaves the body unharmed. And so that word magic bullet was phrased about methylene blue by Paul Ehrlich, and he won the Nobel Prize because he also discovered that methylene blue was a cure for malaria. And that was the primary treatment for malaria for many, many years until the sexy new antibiotics came about, right? And so then the doctors have these cute, girls coming in. It hasn't changed in like 100 years, right?
Mm-hmm,
They've got the marketers that come in, and I think we want the new clothes, right? The new fashion comes out. We want to go put those new fashion clothes on, right? It's like there's something about the psyche of us humans is like something that better's coming along, something sexier, and we don't want to use the same thing that our parents used, right? We want to like have something different, be more autonomous. And that happens with physicians quite a bit. And when a physician learns about a new medication and they start talking to their colleagues, well, they're smart, right? They're educated and they know about the newer cutting edge things. But it doesn't mean that those things are better than the older things. And sometimes these tried and true treatments like methylene blue get replaced by things that are as effective in the short term, but leave the body damaged. And they didn't realize how the microbiome was so important back then in the beginning. And now you have antibiotic resistant colonies of bacteria and malaria that methylene blue doesn't build a tolerance, which is really phenomenal.
Why is that? Why does methylene blue, like for example, my audience knows this, like one of the treatments that, and the test I have to thank you for was the Marcon's test. I had no idea that even existed.
Yeah.
We did the Marcon's test. It came back with like 6 or 8 different strains that were resistant, multiple antibiotic resistant staph. And I'm actually still going through a healing process on that. So methylene blue really can assist, but the body, AKA, doesn't get used to it. It's not like you're going to develop methylene blue resistance. Why is that compared to antibiotics?
Well, the methylene blue starves those microbes from oxygen, and it does it in a way that doesn't seem to have a resistant pathway, right? So where antibiotics, there's so many different types of antibiotics, and what happens is that the microbes, because there's an intelligence, right? A survivability intelligence. They will start to morph, and colonies that are resistant to those bacteria or those antibiotics will start to proliferate. And so when you're killing these microbes at such a deep root upstream way, those changes are harder to make within the microbial colonies.
So they're literally grouping together, and that's what develops, not just like in cities, but across the United States and the world. The antibiotic resistance is massive. It's in animals. It's in the meat that so many people eat. So we're all ingesting antibiotics and medicines, and then that's contributing to the resistance payload. I mean, it's really wild. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer to not use antibiotics unless it's the absolute last step. I mean, if you're going to use antibiotics, it has to be like the last possible thing to do.
Well, you have a good point, because we could be ingesting a lot of antibiotics unwillingly and unknowingly in our food supply. And so then what's going to happen is you're going to obliterate your microbiome, your colony of bacteria that exist in your colon that's there to microdigest things like B vitamins and folic acid, right? So then you become a poor methylator, right? And so these microbacteria produce butyrate as well, like in high amounts, right? And it's like with the Biomax suppository that we have all the butyrate in it. And you look at the benefits of butyrate, it supports the gut-brain connection. It helps to improve insulin resistance. It improves cardiovascular function. It's just like the list of things butyrate does. And you're not going to you have to take butyrate as a supplement, but ultimately you really want your microbiome to be producing a lot of butyrate. And it's only the good colonies that produce that butyrate. So you've got basically good guys and bad guys in there. And when you have an environment that supports the bad guys, then you have an overgrowth of these bad bacteria, and these bad bacteria produce something called endotoxins. And the endotoxins are extremely inflammatory, and they trigger this immune response. And these problems then lead to autoimmunity, chronic like fibromyalgia, degenerative neurologic disease. And it's not just the colon, because this happens in the nasal passage and in the mouth. And they've done studies showing like even oral gingiva, and cavitations in the jaw, right? Root canals can be a cause, where you have areas that microbes can live and exist and secrete their excrement, right? Their toxic waste. This is called an endotoxin. And these endotoxins are literally at the root of all diseases. And it's our doorways. I call it the doorway, the Ganesh, right? Ganesh is the Lord of doorways, right? And so I talk about taking care of your doorways, and the 3 primary doorways are the nasal passage, the oral, the mouth, and the colon. And these are the areas that we get a lot of, if we don't take care of it, we have an overgrowth of the bad bacteria, produces these really negative toxic elements, triggers inflammation in the body. Then the body reacts to the inflammation through a stress response. And if it gets to a certain level, you can't adapt to that. Once you hit that threshold where it can't adapt, the mitochondria then shuts down. Your immune system shuts down. Your brain shuts down. Your heart starts to slow and become more rigid. So everything stops working properly when you have too much inflammation in the body.
Is there a test to see what your endotoxin level is? Is there an accurate test for that?
Oh, yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, so they're also called lipopolysaccharides, LPS. So there's different inflammatory markers that you can look at that would suggest different LPS levels in the body.
So it's not just C-reactive protein, or would you look at that as a barometer and then look at other variables as well?
Some of my favorite inflammatory markers are high sensitivity C-reactive protein, or they also call it cardiac C-reactive protein.
The HSCRP, okay.
And then I also like MMP9.
Okay.
And so this is something available on like LabCorp or Quest. I like LabCorp a little bit better. I think that their results, especially on these inflammatory markers, are a little bit better. And then TGF beta 1 is a really good one. And that could definitely indicate that you have high LPS levels, endotoxin levels. I do this because I treat a lot of people with mold and Lyme disease. And when you have mold and Lyme, oftentimes you have really high Epstein-Barr levels as well. Cytomegalovirus, HHV6, these different viruses, Candida, these become overgrown in the body because the immune system shuts down from this mechanism we just discussed, right? The inflammation. There's a term called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And this is really, I think, more accurately describes this very common condition that a lot of sick people are really suffering from, is that they're having an overload of endotoxins triggering an inflammatory response, shutting down their mitochondria. Thus, the immune system needs mitochondria, just like every other cell. You have a sluggish immune system, then the body can't defend itself from all these other microbes. Like Epstein-Barr, we all have it. It's 96% infection rate in North America. Candida, H. pylori. All of these bacteria are normal flora in our body, but our immune system keeps them in check. And when our immune system can't keep them in check, they go crazy. And so you become a walking soup of infection, which is what I became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you personally dealt with Lyme for how long? How long did it take to heal your Lyme?
Gosh, I was searching for answers for at least 6 years, maybe 7. And then I suffered for another 3 or 4 years trying to find answers to it.
And this is the whole time while you're treating patients, while you're running a business?
Well, I had to shut my practice down for almost 9 months at one point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder how you feel about this. I heard Cody Sanchez talked about this, and so did Mike Dillard. And also so did Zach Bush. People that have really big missions in one field or in one lane, like for you, you're a healer and you heal people through many different avenues. They almost attract, because of what their service is to the world, the very thing that they help others heal. In other words, you can only go so far in someone's shoes that you maybe have walked in yourself. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's something there for you?
Law of attraction or something like that.
I mean, really, whether or not it's Rhonda Byrne in your office telling you that, have you ever reflected on that? Like why you had such very serious health issues and now you help people in this wide breadth of entrepreneurs and athletes and also very sick people?
Well, if you think about strong wind makes for strong timber, right? So if you have a stressor, it's going to promote something to adapt to that stressor. If you have a situation where there's not a stressor, there's not like a stimulus for there to be an adaptation. Like I'll give you an example. Something that I've been quite public with recently is that I was in special education classes. And, it was a point of terrible shame for me for many, many years. I took the short bus to school. This was in Hawaii, right? And there's no middle ground. You're either full on special ed or you're in the regular classes. So I spent the entire day in one classroom with like 12 other people, and most of them were quite messed up. And this was from 4th grade to 6th grade.
Wow.
And then my parents had to mainstream me out of there. And I was convinced that there was something wrong with me and that I wasn't smart. So I think that catalyzed something in me that, and some people I think may not step up as much. Like that's kind of like the point in your life where are you going to step up or are you going to like let it conquer you?
It's like dharma or not.
Yeah.
Essentially. It's a choice point.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So then you have these practitioners that have endured these tough times. They've learned a lot. Well, what's the difference between that and someone that's kind of complacent? Like, you get a family practitioner complacent. They don't really do a lot of postgraduate stuff. They haven't really suffered much in their life.
Yeah.
Versus a doctor like, myself, who's been through some really, really dark times with their health. And, I spend a lot of time taking care of myself. My morning ritual is insane.
It's a few hours, right?
You went through a little piece of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's fascinating to me because there's so many tools. And if y'all get to check out John in Sarasota, you get to go to Advanced Rejuvenation. It's in the show notes right here. You have probably the most huge selection of tools in biohacking I could ever imagine. Everything from like cryotherapy to vibrational chairs to stem cells, laser guided. There's more things there than I think in any office I've ever been to. And in order to use those things effectively, you have to actually have gone through the proper training. You have to understand them. Mm-hmm. You have to train your staff. And in order to really like hold that and be able to serve people in that way, there has to be something, like you said, that you've been through, because it almost, in a paradox, fuels you to keep learning, fuels you to keep curious about what is the new thing, not for just the novelty of the new thing, not progress just for progress sake, but progress because there actually is something good about the new tool or the new thing. I wonder how you, with all these different supplements and really, I guess you could say delivery mechanisms that increase nutrient absorption in the body. That's what MitoZen is, right? Mm-hmm. I wonder, with all the things that you've come across lately, is there like a handful of things that you really believe people should start with? Like let's say people wanted to start with 3 things or 5 things, because there's probably hundreds on the website and in the MitoZen Club. Mm-hmm. And it can be a little overwhelming, right? If somebody tries to go in and be like, well, which one do I start with? Mm-hmm. So for somebody that's really coming into this conversation about increasing nutrient delivery into the body, what are the 3 to 5 pieces they should start with?
Well, before I get into that, we do offer coaching, right? So if anybody has, especially if you have like a challenging, health condition, you can reach out to me. And we have coaching programs where we work with people all over the world. And we do a full set of laboratory analysis on them. And we set up protocols. We have 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month programs that we offer. And outside of that, in mitozen.club, once you sign up, we call them Mitobrary, right? So there's a bunch of videos.
Hey, that's a cool way to say it.
Like, for instance, we had Brain Force Summit, right? I did with Jim Quick, and we're having the second Elements of Vitality with Ben Greenfield, and that's coming up December 8th, right? But we've recorded a number of other shows. We had a women's summit with Mindy Peltz and Nat Nadum and Karen Martell. This was like epic, where we get into like women's health like I think nobody's done. But all of that content is free to members. Ooh. And a lot of the content that we have in there, especially my personal lectures, I get into how we use the product, why we want to use them.
That's so important.
The science behind them.
Because literally you can't go out to the marketplace because you'll be deemed as giving, quote, medical advice, right? Mm-hmm. So it has to be within a safe wall where there is a waiver that's signed and there's an agreement, there's an understanding that like, hey, if you're going to do this, there's actually a safe path to do it. Now, for somebody that just wants to maybe start with a couple of things for general health.
That's the next thing.
Can we talk about that? Yeah. What's the general health all about?
The Blue Eyes is epic. That's obviously a newer product for us. I've been having a lot of fun with that. The peppermint in it gives it a nice pop, so it kind of like brightens the eyes. It's not as much of a burn, but you're very aware of the surface of your eye, and then there's kind of like this fresh breeze feeling. Mm. I gave some to one of the ladies there at Alive and Well here in Austin, and she was really kind of feeling a little bit tired and fatigued. A couple drops in each eye, and she got up and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so awake and alert." I guess I would put 2 categories. Are you like a biohacker and you're looking to have some fun with some products, or are you dealing with some health issues? So the first one is if you're like a biohacker, you want to have some fun, you want some things that are going to like enhance your mood, your mental clarity. I would probably put like the Zen Mist up there. The Methylene Blue is really epic. If you're having problems with sleep, you might consider, the line of Sandman products. Mm-hmm. with regards to like breath work, if you're into breath work, like we have the breath honey, which if we would take a moment here, I would like you to try it on camera.
Okay.
And then we'll get your...
So is it just a drop? I just drop it on the tongue or what?
Yeah. So this has bergamot, sweet orange, peppermint, spearmint, menthol, and honey.
So just one drop?
Put a dropper, half a dropper.
Half a dropper?
Yeah. So this you can do before breath work.
Swish?
No, just let it just absorb.
Tastes great. Thank you. So this is about opening airways?
Yeah, can you feel how that's opening up?
Oh yeah, I love it. It's funny, before we recorded this podcast, I'm like, there's no way I'm not going to have this conversation with you. But my son was sick. And so he gave me a little cold. Shout out to all the parents out there. You guys know what I'm talking about. And so I knew John would have some fun tools. I knew you'd have something great for us. This breath honey is interesting. This is why I love what you do in our relationship, man, because there's always something new, right? Mm-hmm. But like I said, and you mentioned this earlier, it's not progress just for progress sake. Like there's some specific things that these really tools, these supplements address. What does this breath honey address? What's this for?
Well, so one, it opens up.
Oh, I'm definitely feeling it now.
Yeah. It really opens up your nasal passage and your upper respiratory lungs.
Yeah, that's nice.
Take that before breath work. I've also played around with, because oftentimes you do breath holds.
That's great. I love it. Wow, that's so beautiful. I feel like somebody hugged my mouth. So, okay, back to breath work. So do you use this as an ancillary tool for breath work?
So I like the Wim Hof method. And so I'll do some deep breaths. Usually I'll do 40. And so I'll do 30. And then right at 30, I'll start to really pick up the pace for those last 10.
Yeah.
Really forcing it, right?
Yeah.
And so then when I get to that last breath, I do a full inhale, squeeze my perineum, right? And I pull that energy, lock in, the pressures, focus on the pineal, tongue on the roof of the mouth. And I'll hold that just for a few moments, and then I'll fully exhale, and then I'll hold that as long as possible, right? And when you do that last inhale, that can be a really epic opportunity to do the Zen Mist if you're a Zen Mist user.
Yep.
Because that can just really take you to some beautiful places.
I'm definitely a Zen Mist user. I would say that's probably the top email that I get, top message that I get is, where do I get the Zen? I'm like, you got to be in the club. You got to be in the club to get the Zen.
Yeah.
You can't just get it online.
Yeah.
So I digress. Keep going.
So then you have the full exhale, and then there's a breath hold, right? And so usually anywhere between 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes, I'll start to feel that air hunger. And what I've noticed is if I take a little bit of the breath honey, it can extend my breath hold quite a bit because it kind of distracts you a little bit. So two ways. One is opening up the respiratory system just pre-breath work, or using it to extend breath hold. That's how I like to use it.
It's so cool. Okay, so these are the fun things. What he just slid across the table for y'all that are listening in your car. If you're on YouTube, you saw it. This is called Root Zen.
Root Zen.
So we talked about breath honey. We talked about the blue eyes. These are all linked below in the show notes for y'all that want to get jiggy with it and play right now. What is Root Zen all about?
So Root Zen is an essential oil blend: rosemary, camphor, peppermint, eucalyptus, spearmint, and Douglas fir. It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it can be used as a cologne. Girls actually really like it.
Okay.
But it's primarily to activate acupoints. So if you put it on the sides of your nose right here, like your nares, take a dab. This will just really open up your sinuses, which I think would be good for you right now.
Oh yeah, that's great. But so this is not just an essential oil blend, or this is a specific synergistic oil blend?
Well, it's specifically made to activate the perineum. That's why it's called Root Zen. But it's got multiple utilizations, right? So you can apply it to other acupoints in the body. But if you're kind of doing breath work in the spirit of Joe Dispenza and you're looking to kind of lock in that perineum, bringing those oils really bring a lot of neurological awareness to that area of the body. And women need to be more careful than men when they apply it, because the perineum is quite large with a man and quite small with a female. And so if it goes into the wrong area, it can be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I could imagine.
So it's just a dab. I was first made aware of using these different oils on that part of the body when I was taking some training with a functional neurologist that was treating a lot of autistic kids and a lot of kids with ADD and ADHD. And he was showing the application of these oils to the perineum, and the changes that would happen with these kids was incredible. They would just drop into their body and they would calm down, and they were able to learn in their classroom a lot more effectively. I mean, he had video footage of all this. And this was probably 20 years ago now. I'm kind of dating myself, but it was quite a while ago. But after taking that course, I started using these oils myself, and I noticed that there was a definite change in neurology where you felt more grounded, more centered, possibly some activation towards the vagus nerve, where there's like a calm sense of focus. And so it's something that I've shared with a lot of people over the years, but then finally I actually just created something that was for that. So again, in the spirit of breath work, this can be applied to the perineum before we start breath work. The blue eyes, I would suggest taking, especially if your sun gates. For me, every morning, I'm watching the sun come up, I'm on the beach, and this is preluding my breath work. So I'm watching the sun come up. I'm going to put the blue eyes in. I'm going to get that photo biomodulation through the eyes. Put a little bit of root zen on, and then I'll use the breath honey either pre-breath work or during the breath work to kind of enhance the breath hold.
I mean, this is so, I can definitely still feel it. I'm breathing in the oils from the root zen, and my mouth is still have like the tingly opening feeling. One of the things that I know that you love is you love experimenting. Like, you're an experimenter, and a lot of people are attracted to your work in the world at the highest levels. We got to talk about this, man. There was a clip that you shared, and maybe it was a month ago now, but it was about melatonin. And the melatonin is, by the way, if you could slide that one over, I can pull it up to the camera. So this is the Sandman. Yeah. Sandman, I always thought was in a bullet form, but you actually have Sandman that you can just take now sublingual.
Yeah.
The melatonin conversation is really interesting. There's a lot of tinkering going on for different people. You've been testing it for like 20 plus years. You wrote the Melatonin Miracle. Like, this is a huge topic. When Andrew Huberman was asked by Joe Rogan if taking melatonin shuts down your own production, he sidestepped the question.
Yeah.
Why did he do that?
It's a good question. I find that a lot of the conversations that I listen to that were a part of that interview with Joe Rogan are a lot of sidestepping. Melatonin does not shut down. If you take it exogenously, it does not shut down your own production, right? So that's like that. He couldn't answer that statement because he knows, or maybe he doesn't. He seems to be biased against taking melatonin, and my thought would be because he said that he gets nightmares when he takes it, right?
Huh.
And so if you're taking something and it's not working for you, you might have a negative effect to it, right? So I think in general, the medical community has been biased against melatonin, and there's been a lot of misleading things during, I think, medical education that just gets a lot of doctors to be making statements like that it will shut down your own production, or you may not want to monkey with that system, right? Because you don't know what's really going to happen there, right? And what is really interesting is when you look at the research on melatonin, it is incredibly safe. Like, the safety profile of melatonin is, I would challenge anybody to bring me a molecule that has more testing showing safety than melatonin. There isn't. Every cell in your body makes it. Like, we need melatonin to survive. And there's been thousands and thousands of studies of the effects of taking exogenous melatonin on various disease patterns, right? So melatonin with a conversation regarding sleep is just a narrow little sliver of why we even should be talking about melatonin. Like, what about the potential that melatonin is shown to inhibit cancer, right? What about its benefit in cardiovascular? What about even like the Canadian study showed that 40 milligrams a day of melatonin prevented the spread of COVID, and then they've shown studies with melatonin as it relates to not just COVID, but other viruses and the survivability that happens with that, because it prevents that cytokine storm. And, it's very sad to me that melatonin didn't get more spotlight through the whole pandemic, because there's not really another molecule that I think could have served us more than not just melatonin, but higher doses of melatonin. In fact, some of the dosing schedules some of the experts are coming out with are in the hundreds of milligrams, which are, kind of supporting some of the narratives that I've created in the Melatonin Miracle Molecule book, is that higher doses not only are safe, but they can start to have powerful effects on the body beyond sleep. And the reason being is that when we want to adapt, and we can kind of go back to that conversation about endotoxins, right? So if we're constantly fighting this battle where we have microbes, bad microbes, we have good microbes, we have barriers where we have to keep things intact, and we have to keep inflammation to a certain level, and there has to be this what's called homeostasis within the body. And in order for us to maintain homeostasis, we have to adapt to certain stressors. And there's certain stressors that are going to exceed our ability to adapt, which could cause either disease or death. Well, melatonin sits and is produced by every mitochondria, and it prevents that adaptation response to shut down our energy production. And that's ultimately where we lose the battle, is when that inflammation, when those endotoxins exceed our ability to put that fire out, right? We run out of water. If you're like if a house is on fire, you run out of water, well, the house is going to burn, right? So melatonin would be like that extra truck with water showing up, fire truck, right? And so it gives you this stress resilience. And that's why I really love to take it when I travel. Especially traveling can be very stressful. Like, I'm about to make a trip to Portugal.
Yeah.
Right, to Nazaré.
Yeah.
And you bet I'm going to be taking lots of melatonin on that trip.
So why is there so much confusion about this? Because, obviously, if they've listened to our other 3 podcasts, maybe not. But if you're just learning about John's work now, so the book that he wrote is on the screen, the Melatonin, the Miracle Molecule. You went so deep into the research. I'm like, how could he possibly write a 200+ page book on one molecule? Well, you did. Yeah. And there's some amazing, amazing research in there. This is not just anecdotal.
Yeah.
What is the confusion? Why do all the little packages in Target and Kmart, is Kmart even a thing? I'm dating the shit out of myself there. I just said Kmart, y'all. I was born in 1980, so that's why I said Kmart.
Okay.
Walmart, which is what I was thinking of. Why do all these packages have like 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 2 milligrams? Be careful, don't exceed the recommended dose. Like, what's that all about?
Well, this is where you kind of go to some of the concerns Peter Attia expresses, right? So I think between Huberman and Peter Attia, I think we should address some really core points that they bring up. Number one is, if you were to subscribe to this idea that melatonin was somehow harmful and that you wanted to really limit the amount of melatonin that you took, you'd want to take the minimal effective dose, right? And homeopathy, so if oral melatonin is 2.5% absorbed, right? You take 1 or 2 milligrams or 5 milligrams, it's homeopathic, right? But the argument Peter Attia would make would be that if you test, because the pineal melatonin, which is only 5% of the melatonin that we make, is a certain level in the blood, and you wouldn't want to exceed that. So because you want to be so precise and only take either a milligram or a half a milligram, you can't trust the supplement companies that make melatonin, because he's pointing out to research showing that they tested all these different companies and that that they had varying amounts of melatonin and sometimes a lot more than what they were stating on the label, which in his mind would be very dangerous, right? But again, if you really look at the truth of melatonin and you really look at the research, there's no negative consequences to taking higher doses of melatonin, right? So you would have to subscribe to this idea that you need to take these tiny doses to be in a safety zone, right? So what's interesting is the study that he points out is on CBD gummies, right? And I don't know about you, but I think cannabis companies probably are using their own product a little bit, and they might skew their results a little bit. But if I were to trust like melatonin companies, I would rather go to like Pure Encapsulations or like go to some quality companies, but to just pick out random CBD gummies with melatonin in it, and then say, oh, all these CBD gummies that say they have 5 milligrams of melatonin actually had like 10 or 15, super dangerous. I would recommend that you stay away from melatonin because it's it's just an insane mind. Those dots just don't connect in my world at all. So you couldn't even have, I think, a legitimate conversation about this because you're not even on the same playing field, right? So with regards to Huberman, his argument is that it would delay puberty, and then it had a negative effect. It would be anti-androgenic, right? So it would shut down, like, say, testosterone or sex hormones. So this idea that melatonin has a negative impact on sex hormones is based on a study on Siberian hamsters, okay? And what you have to understand about Siberian hamsters is that they're on a breeding cycle that's correlated to the seasons, right? So during the summer, they don't breed much, right? So their sex hormones are lower, melatonin's higher. So the melatonin is hardwired into stimulating these hamsters to either have their sex hormones higher or lower based on breeding cycles. We don't have that mechanism. In fact, there's been studies showing that humans do not have this mechanism at all. My question to Dr. Huberman would be, show me one human trial that shows that there's a negative effect to delaying puberty. I mean, kids produce lots of melatonin. If melatonin inhibited puberty, we would have a real problem here, and I can tell you, my testosterone's fantastic, and I take a lot of melatonin, and I have a lot of patients that I've been working with that have taken, higher doses of melatonin, and we've not run into any of those problems. In fact, there's quite a few reference studies that show that it has a positive impact on sex hormones.
So if melatonin is something that is safe at these higher doses, then when would the timing of these higher doses be most efficacious? In other words, when would you do it? Would you do it when you're traveling? Would you do it when you're recovering from an illness? Because like you had said with the Lumitol, you can take, I think you said 15 or half a square a day, just as like a general wellness practice.
Right.
But then when it comes to the higher dose melatonin, you would do that on a specific schedule. You wouldn't do that every day, right?
That's a great question. So we have two of my favorite molecules in the whole world, melatonin and methylene blue. And I think that this is really important that we nail this down for people to really wrap their head around it. So dosage can change based on necessity, right? So for me, I'm traveling. I've tripled my dose of methylene blue. Normally, I would take anywhere from 40 to 90 milligrams a day, okay? And I might take a couple of days off every month or two just to kind of let my body kind of reset itself. If I got sick, I might take 4 or 5 times the amount of methylene blue that I would normally take because I know, and I would get sun, I would go in the sauna, I would use that photobiomodulation, and I would take colloidal silver because those things are very, very synergistic if I'm getting sick. And I know from experience that I do that. I do the BioHacking, which is that essential oil oral. It's got oregano and fennel and cinnamon and clove. It's like an antibacterial. And then the glutastat nasal spray, right? So I'll do the Lumitol blue, the glutastat, and the BioHacking, and you're kind of covering all your bases there. And very rarely do I actually get sick if I start those right away.
Have you put that in a kit? Like it's almost like the get well kit. All those products need to be in a kit.
It would be like the travel hacker kit, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, don't travel without this.
Okay.
You know? So point being is that there are times where you might not need higher doses of methylene blue if you don't need it, but there may be different stressors that could be physical. Like if you're competing somehow, like you might want more on competition days. If you've got meetings and you need like mental clarity and mental focus because it has such a high impact on the mitochondria, then you're likely going to be experiencing better performance from your brain. The other really interesting thing with methylene blue, like if you're into self-improvement, and so when I say that, if an individual is involved with self-improvement, maybe they might be doing things like plant medicine, or they might be going to retreats. You know, they might do something like a Joe Dispenza seminar where they're doing a lot of meditation. Point being is you're doing something that you're learning, right? And you're taking short-term memories, right? So during these activities, and even if you're in a plant medicine journey, there's short-term memories that are accumulating in a part of your brain. By the way, it's called the locus coeruleus. It's your thumb drive for short-term memory. And locus coeruleus means blue spot. So the blue spot is in your pons, right? It's a part of your brainstem. And so we store the short-term memory, and if we don't transfer that short-term memory to our upper cortex and integrate it, then we have real problems because we can't make sense of what's happening in the now as it relates to what's happened in the past so that we can formulate and context our life, our mission, our relationships, you know, all kinds of things. Ooh. And this doesn't happen with a lot of people, especially with PTSD. You have a traumatic event and then you'll perseverate that. You know, we've all probably gone into cycles where we weren't it's called memory consolidation, right? We've all had experiences where we weren't consolidating our memories effectively, where we have a traumatic experience and we're perseverating these bad thoughts, right? We might have like a negative thought of ourselves or an event that happened, and it's just over and over and over. That record is just playing, right?
Yeah.
I've
been there. Yeah. I think everybody on definitely in the world has been there. Like the monkey mind.
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss calls it that. Yeah, the monkey mind's real for all of us, dude.
Right.
I don't know anybody that doesn't have that. Even the people that say they don't, they probably still do.
So this is the loop that we get into, is that negative thought is going to activate norepinephrine in the brain, right? Just like cortisol to the adrenals is to the body, norepinephrine is the primary adrenaline in the brain. So when you have a stress response, there's going to be norepinephrine that's going to be excreted, and that's going to say, holy shit, we need to pay attention, we need to do something, we need to act. If you're running through a forest and a predator jumps out, you better believe norepinephrine's really going to ramp up. And what's going to happen is that norepinephrine is going to activate something called your salient network, which means your focus on one thing. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to be really focused on that predator. And it's also going to be hardwired to dopamine because you have to react, right? There has to be a muscular, physical action to me paying attention to that one point. And so the locus coeruleus is the point of control master system to the entire norepinephrine system in the brain. So it's kind of like master control for your stress response. So if you have a traumatic experience, or you have a traumatic thought, because you're thinking that thought, it's going to raise norepinephrine in the brain, which is a stress hormone. You're not going to get quality sleep, right? And in order for you to consolidate the memory, you have to have enough REM. There's a few things that need to be intact in order for this to happen. And this is kind of a point of my next book, which is all going to be on the blue spot. It's all on the locus coeruleus. Because you start to get into these different strategies of how to take care of this. Because when you can have a healthy stress response, it's everything. One really interesting fact is that the CO2 sensors, when you hold your breath, like if you hold your breath long enough, you're going to get a lot of norepinephrine that's going to kick in, like, holy shit, I'm going to die, I need to breathe, right? Those CO2 sensors are located in the locus coeruleus. And so ultimately, when we do breath work and we do breath holding sessions, and we're training and getting better at our breath holds, we're actually calming that blue spot down. We're allowing that blue spot to be more relaxed and calm. And this is what needs to happen for this memory consolidation to happen. But if you're thinking and you're triggering that norepinephrine, the blue spot can't fully pause. So it's on a cycle where it fires at a rate, right? So the rate can be either 0.5 to up to 15 hertz. And in order for memory consolidation to occur, the locus coeruleus has to slow all the way down to 1 or less. And if it doesn't, you're not going to consolidate the memory. So it's almost like that thumb drive has to be prepared in a certain way to say, okay, we're going to relinquish this information. So REM has to be in place. The locus coeruleus has to pause. You have to have adequate mitochondrial support because that locus coeruleus is super metabolically sensitive. So when you have problems with like the endotoxins and the inflammation in the body, this also can cause a lot of stress responses. Why people that have chronic infections feel a lot of anxiety. It's because it's triggering that norepinephrine through that blue spot.
Interesting that it's blue, and the methylene blue can literally help the blue spots function.
Well,
the color coordinates are the same.
I know. It's really cool. So, but you just went right there, and we didn't even talk about it. But methylene blue, yes.
Yeah.
They have done studies where they've shown that 1 dose of methylene blue can improve memory consolidation. So people with phobias, they were exposed to their phobia, and then they were given 1 dose of methylene blue. And they compared the people that took methylene blue and the people that didn't, and there was a dramatic difference in the ability for these people to respond favorably to the therapy. And the scientists basically figured out that it was because of this memory consolidation. So do you think that it would be a good idea after a plant medicine journey to take a little methylene blue to improve memory consolidation?
No doubt.
Or even a Joe Dispenza retreat,
Or just any big learning event.
Just put it in the drinking water.
I love that, John, because I think about really and this is our 4th podcast together. I have not been doing this on a daily. I literally only take this at the higher doses when I'm not feeling well. I took some this morning. And so that's really fascinating that this can be something that can help that blue spot, that can help us on a metabolic level. It's way bigger than just when you're sick. I mean, that's the take home right now on the podcast.
Yeah.
Anything else we should know about methylene blue?
Mood. It really enhances mood. They've done large human trials on methylene blue. And if you start taking like 300, 400, 500 milligrams a day, you might just be careful if you're on an SSRI or if you're taking St. John's wort or something like an MAOI inhibitor, because there is a risk of something called serotonin storm. And 30% of serotonin storm reactions can be lethal. So it's not something that you want to mess around with. But certainly if you're below like a 0.5 to 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, you're well within a safety zone. And I would even offer that you'd want to be below 2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight if you're on any type of SRIs. Now, I would also caution anybody, and they should talk to their doctor about this, because you're starting to get into some very gray area, because like what we've talked about earlier in conversation about the medical community and how certain ideas become kind of like laws and rules that aren't based on science as much. Like I was listening to Francisco Gonzalez Lima talking about methylene blue and depression, and he was very sad. He's one of the foremost researchers on methylene blue. And he was sad because the research that showed the dangers with SSRIs and methylene blue were based on this thymectomy surgery. So people had a thymus cancer and they would take methylene blue and the thymus would turn really blue because it's so metabolically active. There's a lot of mitochondria in there. So the surgeons could see it very clearly to remove it. And the patients, so there's very high doses of IV methylene blue in the surgery, if you can imagine. And so there's 5 patients that were on SSRIs and they had serotonin storm and died.
Whoa.
So then after that, the Mayo Clinic retracted the warning about methylene blue because it was just basically a blanket warning saying don't take SSRIs and methylene blue. But it's the dosage, the high doses of methylene blue and SSRIs are where you get into trouble. right? And that might be different with everybody. Like your sensitivity, your ability to adapt to this might be different. There might be different nutraceuticals that you might be taking that are MAOI inhibitors and you don't know about them. So there can be some interesting caveats where you really have to navigate this with some care.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's shift the conversation because it's something that I saw you posted that was so fascinating to me. You actually helped in part of, I'm sure, a whole holistic approach. You helped Dana White crack the code on enhancing oxygen delivery into his brain and body, allowing him to sleep and recover from sleep apnea. I'm sure that had a huge impact on his weight loss, on his health. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I was working with Ari Emanuel, who is the owner of UFC. And I was working with him in his Beverly Hills home. And we had become friends because he heard me on a Ben Greenfield podcast. And he was interested in, some of the health coaching ideas that we had. And then I mentioned this endonasal balloon treatment to him. And so he said, I'd love to try. He's very curious, right? Ari's an amazing man. And he's very curious. He's very into natural medicine and holistic ways. And so he invited me to his home to work on him and his family. So I show up there. I treated him. He was so excited about the benefits because it opened up his nasal passage. He could breathe. He brought his wife in, his sons, and I treated the whole family. And I've been back to see him probably about half a dozen times. And so after one of the visits with him, he FaceTimed me with Dana White. And I would honestly say I didn't know who Dana White was, which is kind of crazy. I must have been living under a rock.
Yeah.
But it, just fighting and combat sports and so forth, just historically hasn't been my thing.
Yeah.
I've shifted that a little bit because as I've been working with Dana and I've been working with some of the other champion fighters and so forth, I've become more interested in it and seeing how it can be spiritual in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so there can be some real beauty.
It's a warrior archetype that I don't think many of us, maybe 99% of us, never actually embody or even touch in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. I used to have this same approach where I was like, oh, it's just glorifying violence. It's like, why do they hug afterwards then?
Yeah.
There's a reason why they hug.
Well, it's kind of like
there's a mutual respect.
It's like the samurai, it's like they're just honor.
It's a part of humanity that maybe is uncomfortable for people to look at, but it's still a part of us.
Yeah.
It's still a part of humanity.
There's so many aspects of athletic and neurologic performance in combat because it's like dancing, but like with lots of like potential bad things that can happen.
With lethal force, yeah. It's like everything's on the line. It's truly living on the edge. I'm not here to say that you should or should not watch UFC. I just think it's a fascinating tangent. But take us back though. Take us back to Dana White.
So I'm actually getting an ozone IV in LA at the time. And I'm sitting there running a drip and Ari FaceTimes Dana. And Dana's telling me about the fact that he got jumped in Boston, many years before that, and his nose was broken. He couldn't breathe through his nose. And I was recently listening to an interview just a couple days ago that he did on a podcast, and he was talking about how bad his sleep apnea. And I didn't, until I heard this podcast, even just a couple days ago, I didn't realize how bad it was. He was waking up in the middle of the night and he was vomiting and throwing up. He was having nightmares, and he was using a CPAP, and he really didn't, like most people with CPAPs, it's
horrible.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
You're not getting quality sleep.
Yeah.
So he flew to me. I was staying at a friend's in LA, and he literally took his private jet, showed up at the front door, and we did this treatment called functional cranial release, which is this endonasal balloon manipulation. And it literally is an expansive pressure that opens up the nasal passage and the sinuses. But more than that, it restores this movement pattern called cranial rhythm. So we all have and enjoy this flexibility to our cranium. And it's not just bones. It's because the cranium is made up of a bunch of separate bones, and the bones come together in unique ways to facilitate this motion called cranial rhythm. But there's a connective tissue layer just inside of the bones, and the name of that connective tissue layer is called the dura mater. Guess what that means in Latin? Tough mother. Because it's got 2,000 pounds per square inch of tensile strength. It's very, very durable. and it's the mother because it's protecting the central nervous system.
Yeah, yeah.
And so just like some mothers can be overly protective with their children, and what happens when mothers are overly protective, the kid doesn't get to explore their environment, doesn't learn, right?
There's not as much expansion.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the same thing happens with the neurological system, is that when you have this bound connective tissue, which most everybody has some level of restriction to this dura, right? To the connective tissue that's behind the face. It's surrounding all of the aspects of the brain and spinal cord. And we get adhesions to this, and it disrupts the flexibility, but it also causes the skull to be contracted and pulled into like a collapsed position. And the maxillary bones are basically under the eyes, and they make up the cheekbones. And these maxillary bones fall down, and the roof of the mouth raises up, crowding out the space in the nasal passage. And so then the palate becomes crowded and the teeth become crowded. So 100 years ago, nobody had to have their wisdom teeth removed. It's not until industrial culture with, refined foods, cooked meat, homogenized milk, all of these things. Weston Price was who's considered the father of the raw food movement. He's the one that discovered this. He traveled all around the world, and he was able to show that the people that were Aborigines maintained these wide dental arches, wide skulls. Their breathing was full, right? They could breathe robustly through their nasal passage, and they didn't get a lot of cavities. They didn't suffer from a lot of the diseases associated with diabetes and degenerative neurologic disease and cancer, and all of these things weren't happening with these Aborigines, where they were with people that were living in and eating the foods and the stressors of modern civilization. So if you appreciate that, then you would almost have to say that almost all of us have some degree of a collapse of our cranial structure, and that relaxing that can be of benefit to their health and vitality. Besides that, I've found that if you're a meditator, and if you're into spirituality, because this cranial rhythm is also working on those pressures, and we talked about Joe Dispenza, those pressures activating those little cells in the ventricles that produce cerebral spinal fluid, causing that piezoelectric effect to the pineal, that after these cranial adjustments, you have an improvement of those systems as well.
It's so fascinating. I mean, the fact that you can literally put a balloon up your nose. No, it's not that simple. I mean, it's obviously you've been highly skilled, highly trained in how to do this. I remember the very first time it happened, we were at the Proper downtown. You remember this? It was like 2-3 years ago. It was maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And Luke was like, hey, do you want to try this treatment from John?
Yeah.
And I was watching people get the treatment, and like their feet would kick out and their hands would kick out. There's an example of this on the screen right now. And it was so uncomfortable, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to trust. I have never had such a weird but also amazing feeling in my entire life. As you know, I've struggled with sinus issues for like 20 plus years. So for me, it felt like there were actually bones popping. And I don't know if that was cartilage or the dura mater, like you're talking about.
Dura. Yeah, release of the dura can cause, it's like a popping, like you're getting your neck adjustment.
It's
like if you
so
go to a
amazing.
chiropractor.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And so now I feel like, because you've put out so much media on this, and because people know you and your functional cranial release techniques, now you have other UFC fighters and even this major musician Diplo, who you did a treatment on as well, Garrett McNamara. You're going to be in the actual 100-foot wave documentary. Is that why you're flying out there, or was it already recorded with some of the work you did with Garrett?
HBO recorded a couple of things. One is they recorded when I was out on the North Shore last Christmas, doing balloon. I did balloons on CJ Macias and Garrett, basically the whole family, and Nicole McNamara. And so that was all recorded. We don't really know what's going to make it into the series and what's not. Yeah. We feel like this has got a high potential that it will.
I think so. It's so novel and people don't know about it. It's so incredible. One thing we didn't talk about was NAD. For people that don't know anything about NAD, what is it?
Yeah. So NAD is like this sister molecule to niacin, and it's important for something called Krebs cycle. So within the mitochondria, we talked about how its job was to move electrons. Well, it moves electrons through this Krebs cycle, and there's all these different nutrients that for different steps are necessary for these electrons to continue their journey from the complex 1 to complex 4. And so NAD is necessary for this journey for these electrons. And we lose NAD during stressful events, especially if we don't get good sleep or if we're using drugs or alcohol excessively, mental, emotional stress. All of these really deplete our NAD levels. And so then when our NAD levels are depleted, then we can't make energy as efficiently as we could otherwise. And researchers are now looking at NAD levels as a big hallmark of aging and also life extension. Like if you can improve NAD levels, then you might be able to extend life. I think they've even been able to extend life in some certain lab situations up to 30% with NAD. So we lose NAD just by having birthdays as we get older. And so as we get older, or the level of stress in our life will dictate the need for NAD, right? So in an ideal situation, somebody's living on an island, they've got no stresses, they have a beautiful life, maybe they don't need NAD.
Yeah.
But that's not how most people live, right? So we want to replenish our NAD levels, but it's not something that you should do every day, right? This is something that you should pulse, mainly, especially if you're into fasting, right? So I'm a big proponent of fasting. I think fasting is something that we should do regularly in order to promote this cleaning mechanism called autophagy, and particularly to clear out something called senescent cells, which are these older zombie-like cells that are they're like those cars that you really need to get rid of, right? They're hogging a lot of gas, they're spewing a lot of pollution. So in order to recycle those into new efficient mitochondria or cars, then we have to be in a fasted state. And so NAD tends to support these senescent cells. So if you're fasting in order to clean out these senescent cells and you're supplementing with NAD, you're really sending like a life preserver to these senescent cells. So we don't want to take NAD at the same time that we're in fasting zones for sure, right? One of the reasons that we put a senolytic in our NAD was to kind of combat this issue just a little bit. We put fisetin in the NAD max, which is an extract of the strawberry, right? So it's a polyphenol from strawberry, but it's considered a senolytic. So there's different plant extracts that are considered senolytic.
What is a senolytic?
So a senescent, you think about the word senescent like somnolence, right? It's like, it's a permanent state of sleepiness that a cell goes to. And these senescent cells, they're asleep, but they're just cruising around and they're just producing a lot of inflammatory byproducts.
They're drunk and they're just knocking into things.
Right, exactly. Very good.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That does not sound fun.
So senolytics are substances that enhance our ability to like lyse, to like a lytic. So this is like a white blood cell may come up to a bacteria and create a lytic effect where it's going to lyse that other cell. It's going to kill it, right? So senolytic is basically lysing a senescent cell. So substances that enhance this whole mechanism. So that's why I created the Fast Track Fast protocol, is to enhance this senescent cleaning where you can have a pre, a during, and a post-fast phase where you can, like, what we recommend people do is preload with NAD because you're like building those NAD storages. And then while you're fasting, you're taking this product called Lucitol, which has sterile stilbene from blueberries and fisetin. Primarily, those two ingredients are very powerful senolytics, but there's other polyphenols that are very strong too. While you're fasting, and then after the fast, you want to do something to really promote growth and repair. So you want things like deer antler velvet or HMB or leucine is the primary amino acid that's really going to stimulate the opposite of that senolytic, right? So, or autophagy. It's based on this mechanism called mTOR, and it's a gene expression, and it's a nutrient sensing gene, mostly for protein. And leucine is the primary protein that really activates mTOR. So if you're inhibiting mTOR, you're recycling and you're cleaning out these senescent cells. if you activate mTOR, you're building new tissues. Like if you were to have a workout after your workout, you might want to activate mTOR, right? If you're fasting, you want to inhibit mTOR because you want to get all the benefits of that fast.
There's so much there. I feel like that's an entire masterclass. By the way, this is in the club. Like a lot of your lectures are in the club. It's on the screen right now, joshtrent.com/MitoZen. I think about, for me, NAD, I've only taken it in the IV form. I've actually never taken any of the suppositories or the NAD bullets. What is the delivery mechanism for NAD? Why is it so important to bypass the gastric process? I remember you mentioned this to me before. You can get NAD that's IV, but there's something really special about when you stick it in your butt. So let's talk about that. Like when you stick it in your butt, something magical happens.
Initially, we had talked about how sick I got, when it was Lyme and mold and Epstein-Barr. And I mean, it was really miserable. And the amount of inflammation I had was just insane. And somebody had recommended I try a methylene, a glutathione suppository. And so I had it from a compounding pharmacy. I had it ordered, and it was just amazing. I woke up the next morning and I felt fresh, and it was like one of the first things that actually worked to calm down the inflammation in my body. And so I started to do some research on suppositories, and I learned that the gastric juices and your digestive juices break down a lot of nutrients, and there's certain really powerful nutrients that you can't get orally because of that. And then there's something called first pass through the liver. So not only if it makes it through the gastric juices and the digestive system, then it still has to face this first pass through the liver. And so once you get through with all of that, like melatonin is very poorly absorbed orally. 2.5% of it makes it into the bloodstream. NAD, it does not absorb orally very well at all. Glutathione is another one. And so a lot of polyphenols don't absorb well orally, like the fisetin and the sterilstilbene.
So you just have to increase the dosages if you're taking it orally.
Well, yeah, a lot of people don't absorb these, absorption is a real problem, I think, for a lot of people.
Okay.
So even if they take large amounts, if you're only absorbing 2.5%, this could be a real problem.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people go to IV clinics and they get IVs, right? Or injections. So this suppository delivery actually has an advantage over an IV in the sense that you may have more of those nutrients get into the cell than you would with an IV, because it comes down to something called peak plasma. So if you take something orally, it's going to be available in your blood for a certain period of time. Like, let's say that you took methylene blue, which, by the way, absorbs really well orally. But let's say the methylene blue has a peak plasma of an hour and a half. So for an hour and a half, that methylene blue is in really high concentration in your blood. You're going to be peeing blue.
That would be the best time to do photobiomodulation, right? When it's at its peak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you want it in the cells and the mitochondria, right? So after about an hour, I like to take my methylene blue before bed, because I know when I wake up, I've got some methylene blue that's solidly in my cells.
Yeah.
It's peaking. And then I like to combine photobiomodulation and hyperbaric oxygen. And that really pushes that extra oxygen into those mitochondria. And I tell you, if anybody really wants to set something up super epic, and I think you and I should put something together for people too, but this is going to be a more expensive experiment for people, right? Is a soft hyperbaric chamber, a sauna, particularly the sauna space, right? There's a small footprint, super strong photobiomodulation because it's got a lot of near infrared.
Yep.
And methylene blue. And that system done 3-4 times a week, at least initially, man, the changes that has made on my life, on my mental clarity, my happiness, my robustness. I don't know that there's something else that someone could get involved with. And if you have a regular breath work practice and you do this, it's really next level. There's a lot of things you could do. There's a lot of money you could spend going to doctors, but this system, we got to come up with something for people to be able to have a somewhat reasonable package. And Jason Saunders with H-Spot and Brian Richards with Sauna Space, they're both friends of mine. And we've been sitting down talking about like, we've got to bring this to the masses. And I think you're the guy for us to do this for.
I love Brian. I mean, I have a sauna space here in the studio, and I have the little portable as well. And I put it right now while I'm recovering from my sickness, I actually put that right, like 4 inches from my face, 6 inches from my face. And I do it with the methylene blue because I know the advantages of that. So yeah, let's do it. Let's definitely talk more and figure that out, because I think that would be really incredible for people.
So when you take a suppository, there's a slow release over 5 to 7 hours. So peak plasma can be 5 to 7 hours, which means that if a cell can only accumulate, like if you've got this methylene blue in the blood and it's got a rate that it can pull that methylene blue into the cell, right? And then it's gone, so it doesn't have any more methylene blue. It only had that 1 hour to pull it in. Imagine if you do extend that peak plasma. So ultimately, where nutrients really make the benefit is if you get them into the cell. So the absorption into the cell through something that is a slow release like that is going to be way higher than even an IV.
Okay.
In a lot of instances.
We explored so much today. And I know, like I said, when we started the podcast, like you have the most curious heart when it comes to this stuff. Like I just love that about you, man. Cause like you're very mature. You obviously handle some of the toughest cases in the world, and you work it with some of the people at the highest levels in the world, but you just enjoy it. And it's like written all over you. It's the vibration that you put off. Even the suitcase with the visual test that you did. And it's just something that you really enjoy. What are you the most excited about as we go to the next year? Who knows what's going to go on with the planet? I mean, who the hell knows what's happening in 24? But what are you the most excited about for you, for your clinic, for just, I guess, the world of functional medicine, really function being the core of it all? Is there anything that excites you and gives you a lot of joy, a lot of love, a lot of hope about what's coming?
Yeah, I share your sentiment about there's a lot going on right now that cause some concern about what might be changing. I just have this feeling like something big's going to happen. I don't know what it is.
Most people I know have the same feeling.
And I think we're going to get through this year without it happening. But after the election, I think things are being like kept on a status quo until after the election.
Yep.
So I'd like to survive. I mean, there's things that I've been thinking about doing some prep work in case, because believe it or not, I've done zero prep work, but like, I think it's time to do something like that.
Sure.
I really enjoy educating people. I like coming on to podcasts like this one. I think this is one of the best podcasts that anybody can listen to. You do such a good job. Your interview style is relaxed, yet very pointed.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And I'm honored to be here, in your presence. I think you're one of the best podcasters out there. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm excited about 24. I don't know what the hell is going to happen, but we're probably going to get some land. We're going to move out of Austin, maybe, who knows? How do you define the way that you live well now? This is the fourth time I've asked you this question. This question of wellness is the question ever since I was a little kid, man, that I've been trying to figure out. Like, how do I live my life well? And then how do I share that with people on this podcast? So how do you live your life well now compared to the last time that you were on the podcast? What's real for you? What's palpable for you now about how you define wellness or well-being for yourself?
Well, there is that aspect of being well and feeling good. Like if you're on the airplane, they talk about you putting the oxygen mask on first, and then you help others.
Yes.
So there's this aspect that we have our basic needs to be a certain status of health. But then after that, it's not really a lot of fun unless you're bringing your friends along for the ride. If you're not doing and enjoying this with other people. Sauna is great, but do it with a group, cold plunge, breath work, everything's better. And when you can amplify some of these friendships, these quote unquote best friend type of friendships, like I feel like I have with you.
Yeah.
This is, I think, among the most interesting things for me right now.
Yeah, there's a nourishment in community. It's where we literally commune together and we're in unity. So I don't know like the etymology of Latin, when it comes to community, but it makes sense that we would commune and we would be in unity and we come together. Why the hell else are we here? Why are we here unless we're doing it so that we can have better relationships with people, with friends, and then of course with ourselves, man. So that is, I know what people got from this podcast today. The link is on the screen. It's joshtrent.com/MitoZen. And by the way, the code, thank you. It's a generous discount code, 10% off. These things are not cheap. There's a lot of R&D, a lot of science, a lot of costs, a lot of shipping, a lot of things that happen to get this to people's homes. So the code is Wellness Force. It's 10% off of your entire cart. So thank you for that, John. And thank you for being my friend and having so many amazing conversations with me. This being another one of them, dude. What do you think we missed in this conversation about well-being? Is there anything that you could leave people with? Maybe just one thread that they can even pull on their own to go on Dr. Google and do their own research. Would it be to go to the club and to join MitoZen Club, or is it something else?
Well, I'm hoping that the conversation inspired some people out there to look at some routines. You know, we talked about not just products, but we talked about protocols. We talked about my morning routine, the breath work, you know, using these products for amplifying some of these already fun activities.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hope that the conversation inspired some people to maybe have some more fun in life. You know,
that's a good way to end it.
And enjoy a healthy lifestyle, but make it fun. Ooh. You know, it doesn't have to be suffering.
That's a good way to end the show. Thank you for being here, man. Until we see you again, we're both wishing you love and wellness. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you love this video, hit subscribe. That way you'll be automatically notified when new videos come out, new episodes, and also share this video with a friend. If you loved it, they're gonna love it too. Check out some of the videos on this screen that are perfectly curated based on the video you just saw. Make sure you follow me, and I'll see you in the next video.